Okay, so just want to give a shout out to this beautiful tearjerker. Part romance, part terror. I just spent an entire day reading it. What a miserable way to spend a Sunday. I was close to crying on every page. It's still available on NetGalley. The EPUB version will archive on June 14th, while the book will be accessible on NetGalley Reader till August 8th, 2025. So read it for free while you still can. The Death of Us by Abigail Dean is published in Great Britain by Hemlock Press, an imprint of HarperCollins Publishers Limited London, and in the United States by Viking. I read the blurb and was hooked immediately, and thankfully my request for an ARC was accepted. The synopsis says the story is about a couple who are driven apart by a home invasion where the rapist terrorizes them for 5 hours and then leaves. He's caught 25 years later, by which time he has graduated to murders. There are lots of stories here, lots of victims, dead and alive. You'll recognize the trajectory of grief in various kinds of victims the rapist killer leaves behind. The surveillance, stalking, and sinister break-ins just to get a feel of the layout of the house and know the lives and interests of the residents, to destroy it piece by piece during the home invasion, the terror when the intruder shows up in front of the unsuspecting and sleepy couple, the psychological torture that ensues when a couple is separated, the infantilized husband in one room who can hear his wife being raped in the other room for hours, but can do nothing to stop it, the wife who is forced by the intruder to act like she's enjoying the rape, and she does not know whether she'll live at the end of it or not. And then the murders of other couples, the children who are left unharmed, and souvenirs collected from each of the houses as trophies. The wreckage is visceral, and you'll meet all the survivors and the routes they took to cope with the trauma, the relationships that get destroyed, the unspoken anger and helplessness, the way more power was given to the killer by indulging in hurting each other and self-destructive behavior. I'm sure the killer enjoyed each of the victim impact statements as affirmation of his enduring infamy, legacy, and power. That's why what Isabel and Edward do in the end, going against expectations to not give any more oxygen to this POS, is all the more powerful. It's beautiful, incredible, and tragic. But more importantly, since I, as the reader, went through 30 years worth of life of not just this couple but everyone else's, who is mentioned in the book, I felt my heart breaking every now and then over what a waste of all that time, dwelling in all that pain, denying yourself love and joy because of feelings of shame, humiliation, and low self-esteem. Early on, Isabel is given back the items that were taken as trophies from the home, the mementos that meant the most to her and Edward. These included her wedding ring, her headphones, and a teddy bear that Edward had given to her as a gift years ago, when their love was first blossoming. But I felt the most important thing that the intruder rapist took from them was their relationship, which was most precious to both of them. I loved the book. I also loved the interconnected family relationships. This couple does not exist in a vacuum away from their extended families and friends, and everyone is fleshed out, not cardboard. The actions of police, detectives, media, parents, all ring true. The dialogue complements the person saying the lines. If you have ever read true crime books or watched documentaries on the subject, you'll recognize these kinds of criminals and their modus operandi, the trauma that the victims and survivors live with, and the families of such criminals who say they didn't know they were living with the serial killer, and the betrayal and the rage that the community feels against such families. As to that inevitable adaptation that this book is likely to have, my biggest fear is that one of the botoxed and expressionless actresses will be hired to play the role of Isabel. In that inevitable series or film, whether it airs on Netflix or ITV or Channel 4. God, please, no Nicole Kidman, Naomi Watts, Scarlett Johansson, Amanda Seyfried, Rosamund Pike, Sydney Sweeney, Blake Lively, Ariana Grande, or that girl from Anora who got the Oscar. None of these actresses have authentic facial expressions. None of them knows subtlety. And Isabel has internalized so much of her trauma that the acting has to be subtle. Maybe someone as naturally beautiful as Leighton Meester, if she can conjure up pain as an expression, which she can't. My only hope is that someone like Ye Jin is hired to play Isabel's character. By that, I don't mean the actress should be necessarily Asian. Rather, if you have followed Ye Jin's career graph, she has always played melodramatic roles who have emotional wounds, and much is left unsaid. She plays women who are sometimes infuriatingly self-destructive and somewhat unlikable, but always tragic, especially in 2006's drama Alone in Love, where she played part of an ex-couple who have gone through a traumatic experience, that is loss of a child, and get separated because of it, but are still in love with each other and find excuses to stay connected in each other's lives, unable to move on. If you've seen that drama, you'd know what kind of subtle mood and movement I think this book requires in an adaptation. As for Edward, anyone who can be the casually cool but repressed Kam Woo Sung from Alone in Love. So no Fassbender, no Timothée Chalamet, no digitally de-aged guy, no one with obviously muscled and toned body, no recipient of People magazine's Sexiest Man Alive. The intruder, rapist, serial killer, Nigel Wood, should be played by Sam Rockwell. I can't imagine anyone else bringing in the terror the way he can. He can also carry in the fat suit and old age makeup for the 2026 courtroom scenes, better than most actors. And the journalist Patrick Royce reminded me of Piers Morgan. I think Royce's behavior and career debacles closely resemble those of Morgan's. Only the author can confirm that one, and maybe Piers Morgan can be convinced to play the role? Andrew Pearson, the successful banker, survivor, creepy tragic figure, and Freddie, the man with 1,000 plans that go nowhere, who will play the ever-faithful Freddie. I am looking forward to that inevitable DEI adaptation. Now, I'm going to vent over some stuff, and this is spoiler territory, so anyone not wishing to continue on listening to the review, kindly tune out now. My problem is with this, and this is a spoiler. I think it would have been more believable if the author Abigail Dean had written both Isabel and Edward as being tied up. It was underwhelming to know in the end that Edward had simply been left in the guest bedroom without being tied up. It was hard for me to believe that the untied husband would not try to get out of the guest bedroom through some window and get help, or try to fight the intruder by grabbing hold of some lamp or something. I mean, Edward was not tied up. There was no guarantee that Edward or Isabel would be allowed to live, and he trusted the intruder rapist to keep his word. That was hard on me. The media and the other surviving husbands focused on the salacious part of what it was like for the husband to sit through the rape next door. But for me, the infuriating and unforgivable part was, why didn't Edward get up and do something? I just thought it didn't make much sense. But people do all kinds of things in fear, and Abigail Dean, the author, brings out that fear and terror humongously well in this book. Other than that, I think Edward was more likable as a person than Isabel, and more easy to get along with than Isabel. Isabel had a problem long before she ever met Edward. She had already tried to kill herself once before, so that kind of melancholic girl needed therapy long before any intruder decided to ruin their lives. But Edward's behavior after the attack, to try to pick up life as it was before the attack, was also foolhardy perhaps. Spoiler number 2, Edward's trauma and statement in the end in court was not explored as well as it could have been. Spoiler number 3. Now this one I really liked. Isabel wrote the victim impact statement, which is the entirety of this book. The book is her victim impact statement. But she gave it to Edward instead of reading it to Nigel Woods, the court, the world, the media, and the public. She gave it to the person she had loved, the only person whose opinion mattered to her, who had seen her at her best and her worst, and accepted her and encouraged her. How hopeless and hopeful at the same time. A beautiful, beautiful romance, I swear. Romantic Melo-Thriller, to be exact. The book is divided into 3 parts, and on NetGalley Reader, Part 1 ends on 40%, Part 2 ends on 94%, so Part 3 is a bit of an epilogue of sorts. I'm sharing few of the many memorable lines here, which also contain spoilers, so anyone wishing to not know anything should stop listening to this review. On 15%, Isabel reminisces about a happy, carefree time in her life, way back when she was a teenager. Quote, I still dream about nights like that every now and then. A wistfulness creeps across my life, tightening each time I realize something or other will not happen again. There was the happy mess of getting ready together, plucking eyeshadow and lipstick from one another's bags, everybody sharing the same mirror, upending glasses into something plastic for the taxi. There was the incoherent journey to the club, when the driver heard all our best secrets, that Kieran no longer knew if he loved the girl he lived with, that Lindsay had slept with somebody that term who said just before he came that the Concorde was coming into land, that I had spoken to Edward nearly every day since September. Yes, I know. At the end of it was the club, the pound for entry and the descent into smoke and noise, the stick of heels on wood, the happy mass of the dance floor. Unquote. On 10%, one of the many passages which deal with Isabel talking directly to Nigel while writing her victim impact statement. Quote, I know, Nigel, you had it worse. You grew up with a brother who broke your arm twice. Your mother left your father and dated again. There were a few boyfriends, some of whom despised you, a number of whom put you in your place. Your brother was sent to a juvenile detention center, then a prison, then a serious prison. I assume you became a policeman out of spite, which is a sentiment I can appreciate and which could, I suppose, have been a neat ending to your story. When they caught you and collated the details of your childhood, the dim social housing, the toothless matriarch, the contempt for women and the desire to belittle men, I was disappointed. You were so predictable. Unquote. At 70% of the book, one of the victims is saying in quote, What I would say to you, Mr. Wood, Mrs. Covington said, is that I became such a fearful person after I met you. That was how my son always knew me, as this frightened little woman. You didn't kill me, and you didn't rape me, and we all survived you. I've always been very thankful for that, but by God, it sounds like a small thing, I suppose, but I was so much more fun before I met you. Unquote. After the attack at 46%, there is a passage that deals with the trauma that Isabel is going through but is unable to verbalize. Quote, I remember the strangeness of the house. I lifted a picture from our bedroom wall one Saturday morning and took it to Edward, who stood at the kettle with the hood of his sweatshirt hiding his face. Where did it come from? I said. Did you choose it? It was an innocuous thing, a photograph of moorlands in Derbyshire, a white hut we had walked to one summer. Isabel, he said, it's been there for years. In that same place. Just there. I don't like it, I said. And this happened. I disposed of clothes I had loved, replaced our muddled crockery with uniform collections. I painted our bedroom horribly in dead salmon and lined the fireplaces with diffusers. An exorcism, Edward said. Wouldn't that be nice? But there was no exorcising you, Nigel. You changed the way I walked home on a Friday evening. You changed the taste of wine, the plot of a novel, the confidence of Edward's hands. Unquote. There's this beautiful passage at 81% when Nina, their sort of adopted daughter who had lost her parents to Nigel Woods, has written her victim impact statement, but she doesn't finish it in quote, and Edward glances at it. The passage is like this. Quote, Nina had left her statement on the table, a single sheet of Times New Roman. She would have printed it before she left for New York, just in case the hotel didn't have the facilities. He thought of her packing, checking for it the way a wedding guest might check for their speech. Nina. He knew her well. He would take the thing with him and spare her the risk of it being discovered. He glanced at the paper only once, knowing better than to seek out pain that might otherwise be avoided. But the one line he saw stopped him halfway to standing, something she had never acknowledged, though he had always hoped she might know. Despite you, I've still been loved. Unquote. And then there's the passage at 84% as to what happened between the intruder and Edward in the guest bedroom. Quote, You will stay here, the invader said, just like this. Do you understand? You don't move. Whatever you hear, you will stay. Do you understand? Yes. Good. Good boy. If you leave this room, I will kill her. But if you stay here, if you're a good little boy, I'll only kill you. Only me? Only you. I'll leave her. I'll let her live. The invader was standing. Edward did not move. He did not move when the invader left the room. His brain was flailing for the fix, the weakness, the thing he must have missed. It could find nothing. He did not move when the noises began. He did not move when sunlight found him, spreading slowly across the carpet and onto his naked back. He did not move when the invader returned. This is it, he thought. And in the thought there was relief. He would never need to face her. He would never know what happened next. He would never need to face her. Close your eyes, the invader said. He gripped Edward's hair and pressed his face into the carpet. Count to 100, the invader said. And though he could hear Isabel crying, calling for him, not knowing whether he was alive or dead, he counted. He counted all the way to 100, just as he was told. Unquote. And then there's Edward's victim impact statement at 85%. Quote, The impact of Mr. Wood's actions might be summarized best by the fact that I have never shared this before, Edward said. In some sense, I've been lying there ever since, just as he asked me to. But I believe, for the sake of the people I love, that it may be time for me to get up off the floor. He found Isabel's eyes. I've spent a lot of my life terribly ashamed, he said. To me it didn't matter what Mr. Wood had threatened, only that I had succumbed to it. I had done nothing. I had done nothing while my wife was tortured. I had abandoned her when she needed me the most. I believed that I had lost my role as a partner, and with it, lost her respect. I understand now that this was Mr. Wood's exact intention. Unquote. And then, on the same page, at 85%, is Isabel's non-victim impact statement. Quote, She looked at him now. There was terrible sadness in her face. He had spoken with an authority he hoped would subdue any sympathies, but she knew him better. He could see longing, too, for the lives they had not lived, or had not lived together. He watched as she stood and walked to the stand. Her hair bobbed with each step. She held her head careful and high, looking at nobody. At the front of the room she turned to the judge. "I have nothing to say," she said. "You're quite sure, Miss Nolan?" "Nothing at all." But she stayed there a moment longer, frowning, as if there was still some decision left to be made. "He does not deserve a word of it." Unquote. This is a hauntingly beautiful, romantic mellow thriller, and I highly recommend its reading.